Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this first meeting of the subcommittee, the Governance and Audit Subcommittee of the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee. The first item on your agenda is the election of a chair. The chair must be one of your lay members. Do we have any nominations, please?
I understand Alan Davis has put himself forward and has the relevant experience.
Thank you, Sherry Wolf. Can we have a seconder for Alan?
Could I second that? Colin Prosser.
Thank you, Colin. Can we have by a show of hands whether that can be agreed, the election of Alan Davis as the chair of the Governance and Audit Subcommittee?
Oh, is that a virtual hand or a physical hand? Can you see us all?
Physical hands, fine. Thank you, that's carried. Alan, congratulations, you're duly elected as the chair of this subcommittee. Can you take over the seat from here?
Yeah,
next item on the agenda.
And thank you for kicking us off, and thank you to everybody for nominating and voting for me. One thing about this Microsoft Teams thing is I can't necessarily see everybody. So if you want to say something and you've got an electronic hand up, then I may not see it. So you might have to raise your voice at me. Hopefully it will be okay though. So thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3, which is the election of a deputy chairperson for the committee. Similar to my appointment in the previous item, we need to have someone nominated. Does anyone have any thoughts on that matter, please? Colin.
Yes, can I nominate Andrew Blackmore, please?
Thank you. Can we have someone to second that? Sherry, I think, has seconded. Thank you very much.
No, I wasn't seconding. I was wondering if I could nominate myself. Because, yeah, it'd be a good experience.
So I'll just refer to Jane on that one for some advice in terms of can Sherry nominate herself?
Thank you, Chair. So you can certainly put your your name in the ring, but we'll need somebody else to make the formal nomination, please.
Nathan.
In which case, I'll nominate Sherry.
Thank you very much. Look, do we have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. And as that means we now have 2 candidates for this appointment. How would we deal with that then, Jane, in terms of?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we've actually received a formal nomination for Andrew Blackmore, unless, Chair, you're making that nomination.
Sorry, I thought
I think Colin did.
Colin nominated.
Excuse me. Is there a seconder for Andrew?
I would second that.
Thank you. Shall we have an election then between the 2 candidates, so Andrew Blackmore and Sherry Wolf? Would you like to begin with the nomination for Andrew Blackmore, Chair?
Yeah, so how do we conduct the 2? I mean, it's not a process here.
By a show of hands, please, beginning with Andrew Blackmore. Could all members who would like to support his nomination as the deputy chair of this subcommittee raise their hands? So we have Councillor John Cook, Colin Prosser, Alan Davis. Have I missed anybody? 3. And for Sherry Wolf? So I have Councillor Good, Councillor Drake, Councillor Yole, excuse me, Councillor Kerry Rice, is your hand up?
Yes, please, to vote for Sherry.
Thank you. Councillor Wendy Lewis, is your hand up? Virtual hand. Councillor Good and Sue Erickson. Have I missed anybody? Councillor Hooverheen.
Yes, Sherry, please.
Chair, I think that's the vote is carried in favour of Sherry Wolf as the deputy chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sherry, congratulations.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. So we'll move on then to item 4, declaration of interests. Do anyone in the committee have any interest to declare for this meeting's agenda?
Do we need to declare stuff that we've already declared to Jane, or or anything since our declarations to Jane?
I can assist you, Chair. It's declarations of interest in items on the agenda today.
I see no hands up, so I presume that no one has anything to declare. Can I just pick up on that point that Sherry made, and that we have provided, I think, declarations of interest to you, Jane. Certainly the lay members have, I think. Do we need to update those, and how do we update those if circumstances change?
Yes, so you should have all, with the exception of Councillor Drake, apologies Councillor Drake, because you were a late nomination to this committee, but I've received declarations of interest from all members. Your register of interests are published. So the councillor members, your register of interests are published now on the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee's website. Those declarations of interest need to be kept up to date. The obligation upon you is to update the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee via me if you have any new interests arising, and that update must be within 28 days of the interest arising. At meetings themselves, if you have anything that you wish to declare in relation to an item on the agenda, that declaration should be made preferably at the beginning of the meeting during this item. And if something arises during the course of the meeting, then please raise your hand or message me directly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. Helpful. Right, we'll move on then to item 5, the terms of reference and draft work programme. If you're following this in the meeting pack, it starts at page 6, and we as a committee are asked to note the subcommittee terms of reference and approve a work plan during the municipal year 24-25. I call on Agenda to take us through the report, please.
Yeah, good morning and thank you, Chair. So this item, as you say, Chair, concerns itself with the terms of reference for the committee and also the proposed draft programme for the municipal year 24-25. So the CJC approved this constitution at this meeting of the 18th of March, and part 3 of the constitution sets out the terms of reference for the subcommittees and advisory boards, including the Governance and Audit Subcommittee. The terms of reference can only be formally amended by the CJC, but the subcommittee can make recommendations to the CJC to amend its terms of reference, and the subcommittee's terms of reference are set out as Appendix 1 of the report. In addition, Appendix 2 sets out the committee's draft work programme for the year, and it's intended that officers work with the subcommittee to develop a balanced work plan alongside making appropriate information and support available to allow the subcommittee to discharge its responsibilities. So in preparing the plan, we've given consideration to a number of factors. So for instance, a number of reports that will come before the subcommittee will have statutory deadlines. So clearly we need to think about that in terms of the CJC's duties to observe those statutory deadlines. So for example, key financial statements like the annual budget, that needs to be approved before the 31st of January each year. And the statement of accounts, again, Audit Wales issue statutory deadlines each year in terms of the dates for the unaudited accounts and the accounts to be approved. So what we've done is we've worked back from those dates. We've looked at the CJC's meetings planned for the year. We looked at the statutory deadlines that we're aware of. And we've also had to look at key factors such as the timescales and the resourcing plans for key partners to support us with our work. So for instance, internal audit and external audit. So this is the CJC's first, the governance subcommittee's first work plan. And as I say, it can be revisited and updated during the year as the subcommittee develops a greater understanding of the CJC's work. So for example, its governance arrangements, the decision it makes and the associated risks. With that in mind, just to note, Chair, that risk will be a standing item on the agenda going forward, and that needs to be added to the work plan. So the current draft largely reflects many of the standard items that you would expect to see in the work plan. And as I said, officers are keen to work with the subcommittee to develop the work plan over the coming months. And I think the final point I'd make, Chair, is that around presentation, and this is where we as officers also need to be a bit more mindful around how we present items. So there's one item on the work plan at the moment which simply suggests the 25-26 budget report, but actually that's quite a comprehensive report. which we'll bring to you ahead of the January deadline, and it will include the 25-26 annual government statement, which will be a key document the committee will concern itself with, but also the Treasury Management strategy document. So that's a suite of the documents that includes the Treasury Management strategy statement, the Treasury Management policy statement, the Treasury Management Principles and Schedules document, as well as the CJC's minimum revenue policy statement. So there's a whole raft of documents that sit behind that budget report, and Chair, what we'll look to do is to update the work programme so we're a bit more clear and transparent on the nature of that. So Chair, that's all I was going to say. The recommendations are set up in paragraph 1.1, and happy, myself and Jane, to take any questions around the draft work plan.
Thank you, Roger. That's very helpful. Can I just pick up on one of your later points there about the Treasury stuff, for example, that you talked about, the papers being produced. Do you see any engagement with this committee in that process, in the background, outside of these formal meetings?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. We're happy officers for us to work through all of the necessary steps. We do have an existing Treasury Management strategy. We will be bringing updates to you in 24-25. There's a mid-year update that we be bringing to you at the September meeting, and absolutely either as part of that discussion or other discussions, we can have a look how we can break that significant piece of work into areas where the committee has the opportunity to get involved and early engagement and input into those documents.
Great, thank you very much. Does any member of the committee have any observation or question, please? No comments? If I could just...
Chair, sorry, it's a request to you. You started to talk about page numbers, and for some reason I don't have page numbers on the report. So could you also refer to item numbers, if you would, please?
Yep, certainly, will do. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other observations on this one? One very small point for me then on the terms of reference at 1.2.3a. It says review and scrutinise something. Well, that's not what the rest of the paragraph is, but I think one of the important things we need to do in early days is understand what those words like review and scrutinise actually mean. How much scrutiny do we put into financial affairs? And it's risen to a subject of conversations elsewhere where I have a similar role, where understanding on both sides of the executive and the committee who is responsible for doing what is a piece of work I think we need to do reasonably early to be absolutely clear. So hopefully we can build that into our thinking as well, if that's possible, please. Okay, no more comments on this item. Grand. Then we are asked, as I said, to note that the terms of reference and approve the work plan. Are we happy to note and approve? All those in favour, hands please. Thank you very much. That's clear. Approved. Then we'll move on to item 6, which is page 13 in the long pack of information. And for this item, we're asked to consider and approve the Internal Audit Services Charter for 24-25. That's attached to the report. Ajinder, I think you're introducing this one again, are you?
Yeah, just to introduce the report. So members will note that the CJC's internal audit service is provided by Rhondda Cynon Taf County Borough Council, and we have Mark Crumbie, the head of internal audit, and Lisa Cumston, internal audit manager, with us to present this report. I had to hand over to Mark and Lisa.
Thank you, Ajinder. I'll take everyone through this report today. Agenda item number 6 is the Internal Audit Charter for 2024-25, and the purpose of this report is to present to the Governance and Audit Subcommittee the Charter for the year. So report reference 4 provides some background information in that the Internal Audit Charter is a formal document that defines the purpose, authority and responsibility of internal activities. The Charter establishes internal audit's position within the organisation. It authorises access to records, personnel and physical properties relevant to the performance of audit engagements, and it defines the scope of our activities. So report reference 5 states that the Governance and Audit Subcommittee has responsibility to review and approve the Charter in line with the committee's terms of reference and the public sector internal audit standards. The public sector internal audit standards are applicable to all areas of the UK and are based on the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors Professional Standards Framework. The Charter you will see is split into 4 main sections as detailed at Report Reference 8, and there are full details included under the headings of Purpose, Authority and Responsibility, Independence and Objectivity, Proficiency and Professional Care, and there's a Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. So at Report Reference 13, we refer members to Appendix A of the report, which is the actual internal audit charter for the year. And you will note that the provision of an internal audit service is undertaken by Rhondda Cynon County Borough Council on behalf of the CJC, which is an arrangement underpinned by a service level agreement. And the charter has also been prepared to reflect the delivery of the internal audit service in the year and reflects the public sector internal audit standards. We've also made reference at number 14 of the report, item 14, to the external audit, the external assessment of the internal audit service, which was carried out in 2022, and the results of this external assessment reported full compliance with the standards. And I'm happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you, Lisa. That's very helpful and also very well presented. Thank you very much. Any questions or observations? Sherry.
I have a quick question. Who carried out the external assessments?
The last external assessment was carried out by the system within Wales was a neighbouring authority carried out the assessment. So it was an independent assessment carried out by another internal audit section. So it was the Newport Council carried out the internal audit of the external audit assessment of the standards. So we prepared the information, we pulled it all together, and then it was the neighbouring authority that did the independent review. They wrote a formal report. The report was presented then back to RCT's Governance and Audit Committee to demonstrate compliance with the standards.
Lovely, thank you very much.
And that's common practice across all local authorities, certainly in Wales. So that's good. Excellent. Any other comments or observations? Thank you. So I'll just, Lisa, can I ask a sort of a higher level question to some extent? And this isn't, please don't think this is negative or challenging. I just want to make sure I can see the structures. The CJC is different in that it is prepared to take far more commercial risk in terms of what it's doing and be more work in a different way to local authorities. Is that a challenge for you to get the internal audit head around to understand their way of working, as opposed to sort of taking the public sector, the local authority internal audit paradigm and placing it onto the CJC? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that links into our internal audit plan as well, which is the next item on the agenda, and the arrangements for the plan, and sitting down and having those discussions with officers within the CJC about risk areas, assurance areas, control areas. So I think those discussions over risk and risk management and the different risk appetite and I think all of that is factored into the internal audit plan and the audits that we carry out and the discussions that take place with officers within the CJC.
Okay, grand. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Could I just add something as well, please, Chair? I think it's important to note that internal audit don't challenge policy. So internal audit are there to monitor compliance with procedures. So whether it's a council environment that we're monitoring, or whether it's the CJC, we will be monitoring compliance with the procedures in place within those separate organisations. So I think that's that's an important point to note as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. It's fine. Any other questions from Colin?
Thanks, Chair. I didn't know whether it was better to wave or to turn my mic on. Yeah, I was just going to say at point 19, it mentions the well-being of future generations. And I know that, for those who've been involved in governance and audit for a couple of years, it's apparent that owing to austerity, that there's not an awful lot has actually been done in practical terms about that. And I can see that that point is made in a number of these papers concerning the well-being of future generations. So I was hoping that given the remit and purpose of the CJC, that we could look at that, perhaps going through our meetings, going through the year, and try and make sure that that where possible, that something is done to have some realistic and positive action around that.
Any comments? Any response to that across the committee? So, Colin, sorry, Sue, did I see your hand again?
Yeah, sorry. Noting Colin's comments there, I just wanted to come back to just some comments from Mark, if you don't mind, in respect to your question, Alan. Mark, I note that you're saying that you don't challenge, as an internal audit service, you don't challenge the policy, and I understand that, coming from an internal audit background myself. And I'm just looking ahead, really, just so please, you know, you may come on to this later, but I noticed that the next item on the agenda is looking at the internal audit plan, and one of the items on there is risk management, and it's a consultancy review. So in that case, would you be challenging the policy, the risk management policy?
Yeah, so the public sector internal audit standards require internal audit services to have a risk-based audit plan that includes assurance and consultancy assignments. So I think that there's starting to be a balance there in terms of the assignments that are included within your audit plan for this financial year. The discussions with Virginia during the planning process for our audit plan identified an area around risk management. I think that it's a new organisation now, so I think that our expertise in terms of our risk management arrangements in Rhondda Cynon Taf, for example, so we'd be looking to do almost a compare and contrast exercise here in terms of what the risk management strategy sets out for the CJC, looking at the risk registers, and the outcome of that work will be reported back into this Governance and Audit Committee later on in the year then. So we wouldn't necessarily be challenging the risk appetite of the CJC, because that's not our role. We will be looking at the sort of governance arrangements that are in place to manage those risks, to report the risks, and to track and monitor those risks as well. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Mark. I'm just wondering whether there's a conflict there, because it's obviously listed in the plan, and we will come on to this, so apologies for jumping ahead a little bit, but it's all relevant to the question. It's listed as a consultancy point of review rather than an assurance review, which is what you're sort of explaining, I suppose, that you're providing assurance to the CJC, and I'm just wondering whether there would be a conflict at some point if you're going to make recommendations from that. But maybe, you know, like I said, that's in the next agenda item, so perhaps we can discuss it more at that time. But thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. Can I just go back to Colin's point? Colin, can I just be clear what you would like us to be doing what does your comment want to fall into the work programme? I suppose is the
thanks, Chair. It was just really running as a golden thread, because it appears in a number of these documents as something we will have regard to, but I suppose it's about sustainability and benefit, and always being mindful of those things in whatever the CJC does. You know, I mean, there are huge financial challenges for all of the councils. So I think that, you know, the long-term impact and benefit is really, you know, what we ought to be concentrating on, you know, in all that we do. And you know, there's been a lot of short-termism lately, which has been by necessity, owing to the financial situation. But given the remit of this organisation, I think we do have the opportunity to do something positive.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you very much. Sherry. Mike, you're muted, Sherry.
Thank you. Further to what Colin has brought up, I think as a committee, I think the future generations, that is something that we have as a value and part of the culture of the committee. So I think what you said there about it being a golden thread running through is something it's just something that's in our mind at all times when decisions are being made and things are being reviewed. So I think as far as we're looking at the values and culture of the committee, then keeping in mind for that.
I think attitudinally it's important that we are very conscious of the future rather than looking back at what was and has been and counting the numbers. It's the impact that we're trying to create, it not only for the future generation, but within this hugely valuable project. You know, how will it deliver the maximum benefit? So that's really, really important to us. Somebody else has a hand up, but I can't see a name.
Councillor Wendy Lewis, hand up, Chair.
Thank you.
Mute,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Chair. I'm not sure how that happened. I didn't have a question, sorry.
Well, good to hear from you anyway, Wendy.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you. Anything else on this particular item? Excellent. I'll just make one small point. In terms of structurally, I had an expectation in the charter that the internal audit would report to this committee and to the chair of this committee in governance terms, but it's not explicitly stated as far as I can see in the charter. Could you make a comment on that, please?
I think perhaps I can come in and assist here, Chair. This committee, this Governance and Audit Subcommittee reports to the Corporate Joint Committee. So certainly at present, unless there's a delegation made by the Corporate Joint Committee, you would be considering reports from internal audit and then recommending their approval to the Corporate Joint Committee.
Okay, fine, thank you for that. So no more points on this one? Excellent. We're asked to consider and approve the Internal Audit Services Charter. Can we so do, please? All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much. We will now move on then to item 7, which is the draft risk-based internal audit plan for this year. Starts on page 35 of the information pack, and we're asked to consider and approve the draft risk-based internal audit plan for 24-25 as presented in the pack. Jinder, once more, I turn to you as the person to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I will very quickly hand over to my colleagues from Internal Audit, Lisa and Matt, to present the report, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Agenda. So agenda item 7 is the draft risk-based internal audit plan for 24-25, and the purpose of this report is to present the plan to Governance and Audit Subcommittee. So report references 4 and 5 details that the public sector internal audit standards provide a framework within which a plan should be compiled, and in line with the standards, the head of internal audit must establish a risk-based plan to determine the priorities of internal audit activity which are consistent with the organisation's goals. The Internal Audit Charter, as reported previously, details the methodology by which the plan is compiled. And report reference 7 refers to the standards and that they require a risk-based plan, but the standards also require the audit plan to cover the overall control environment as far as is practicable. This supports internal audit and the Governance and Audit Subcommittee to conform with the standards in compiling with the plan. It enables Governance and Audit Subcommittee to monitor the adequacy of the risk management framework and the associated control environment of the CJC for the audit review set out in the plan. And it also enables us at the end of the year to provide an annual opinion presented as the head of internal audit annual report. So the draft risk-based plan is attached at Appendix A and also shows the source from which the audit originated. I think it's also key to mention that the internal audit plan needs to be flexible, as internal audit needs to be able to respond to changing circumstances and events that may occur during the year, such as requests to respond to new issues as and when they arise. And I'm happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. Any questions or comments from the committee? Could I I have two questions. Firstly, in terms of the content of that audit plan, I may be missing it, but I don't see any mention of fraud. Do you have any intention to look at fraud as within your internal audit?
The need assessment that was undertaken identified those areas listed. So we aren't planning on undertaking any assignments in relation to the organisation's fraud procedures this year. That's something obviously that the Governance and Audit Committee has has the right to identify as a need if needed. But if there are any potential frauds during the year, or alleged frauds during the year, then we will work with Harjinder and Jane as well then, and Kelly, to identify whether internal audit resources are needed to investigate those frauds as well. Harjinder, I didn't know whether you got anything else to add on that one.
No, I think it's a good question from the chair. Jane, I know within the financial procedure rules for the CJC, we do have a policy around that, and we did have a chat around the arrangement and how colleagues from RCT, whether the internal audit section or any of the other the parts of the sections, could support us on that. So happy to, Jane, if you want to say anything further on this or pick this up going forward, really, as part of the work plan.
Yes, thank you. Chair, the Corporate Joint Committee is under an obligation to adopt an anti-fraud bribery and corruption policy, and they're in the process of doing so.
Thank you. And my second point, if I may, Lisa, it's resourcing. What resources do you have to undertake the work that's in that plan?
Thank you, Chair. We have a team of internal auditors within Rhondda Cynon Taf Council. They're a team of very experienced auditors. They've been auditing within a local government environment for many, many years, and the audit plan and the days that we have agreed with the Corporate Joint Committee and the audit areas, they were all taken into account in respect of the needs assessment and the service level agreement of the days that internal audit would be providing to the CJC and the level of assurance that the CJC needed on key areas.
Thank you. My final point for now, anyway, is there anything that you want in terms of engagement with members of this committee to help to develop and confirm that plan looking forward?
I think from, the purpose of today's report is to get, an agreement on the plan from the committee, and then going forward, we will be reporting our progress on the plan, and when we are reporting that progress, I think going forward, if we hit any obstacles or if there are any issues that arise, or if there's anything that we need to bring to your attention, or if there are areas that we need support on, we would raise those as and when throughout the year. Okay,
and how do you want us to feed to you thoughts on things that we think might be added to the longer term work plan at some point?
In respect of areas to add during the year, or in respect of areas to add to the plan for next year?
So, for example, my comment on fraud just now, as a working example, if you hadn't come up in discussion in this meeting, how would you want us to engage with you to get that onto your radar?
So I think this year, the timing of you having this report is slightly later than what we would normally like to do. So next year, for next financial year, you will get a draft audit plan around about towards the end of the financial year, which will be the outcome of discussions that we have with the Section 151 officer, and then you will have the opportunity then to identify areas that you consider based on the work that's been delivered throughout this year, for example, by internal audit, by the external regulators, and also by other parts of the organisation, so that you can feed those into the draft plan for next year, and then be satisfied that you've had adequate input at that point. Then, having said that, if there are areas that you consider that are risk areas, either now or throughout the year, then they can be raised and discussed with us, and then we can all just consider whether they would be relevant to be included within the audit plan.
Thank you, Mark. They're very helpful. So it's a matter of timing. Colin.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was just to labour the point again about the fraud. I was going to ask: does Rhondda Cynon Taf have a dedicated fraud officer or a person nominated within the audit team to manage fraud, and have they undertaken the specialist training that's available for that?
So the Internal Audit Service has experience of undertaking investigations around potential breaches of procedures. For example, the council has a corporate fraud team, and I'll have to defer to Harjinder here, I'm afraid, to see whether there's discussions that have been had with the counter fraud team as part of the wider finance SLA that we've got, that it probably does mention access to the counter fraud team, and that fraud team are fully qualified fraud investigators, and they can undertake interviews under caution, etc.
Yeah, and that's the point I referred to in my last comment, Mark. We have had some discussions with Paul Griffiths on the Cynon Taf, and as Jane said, that work's ongoing, so we'll look to pick that up.
Thank you, Jinder. Jinder, your hand's still up. You've got another point?
Yeah, so Councillor Hoolahan had his hand up before me, Chair. If you perhaps want to go to Councillor first.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Phil. Phil, we're not hearing you.
Sorry, the question I wanted to ask, Chair, is what's the timeline for Audit getting involved with a new project? So they declare a new project this year. When will be the first time that Internal Audit have a look at it? Will it take a year to get a report out?
Who can pick that up, please?
By project, are we talking about the individual audit assignments listed within the draft plan, Councillor?
No, a brand new project. Never heard of it before.
So, are you thinking of a new commercial project that the CJC wants to undertake?
Well, invariably, yeah.
Okay. So, Kelly, can you pick that up, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to.
I think I'm going to have to come back to you because I'm not making much sense of this. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor, did you want to clarify what you meant then, and I'll try and answer your question as best as I can.
Okay, thank you. It's just come back from Newport now, so probably that's the.
Chair, if I can just explain, just in terms of giving a bit of an interim explanation on the question I think that's being posed. It's difficult to say, you know, what constitutes a new project, because what happens is we have an open, competitive, if you like, wider investment fund, and we have an investment framework governing that. Sometimes projects are initiated internally through our various different boards. Sometimes we accept submissions from the private sector, from universities. Sometimes there's a bidding opportunity. We go through a very rigorous process of business case development, due diligence, and the board that oversees all of that initial developmental work is our investment board. So I would imagine that the question is more about the interface of that investment board with this governance and audit committee. And again, that's something we may want to pick up again, but we can certainly bring a future paper, I think, just describing the different governance arrangements, just so there's a basic orientation around the whole system and how that works as one.
I think that would be helpful. My view, my sort of feeling at the minute is that we would not have a very active engagement at the early stage of that. We are here to ensure that you have processes that you are following, you have decision points, you have gate reviews or whatever it might be, and all that runs correctly. But actually getting into the meat of a project and understanding its risks, etc., that is not something for this subcommittee. It is something for the executive and others, to other committees, to other groups to get.
And Chair, if I could just add on that point, as well as the investment board, of course, the other statutory subcommittee we have here is the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I think, Chair, you've mentioned a couple of times the possibility of doing some joint work, you know, some perhaps joint commissions in the future. But if I bring a paper perhaps to the next meeting that sets out the overall governance structure, what each of the groups do, and the overlaps and interfaces, perhaps that will be helpful initially.
Thank you, Kelly. That's very kind offer, and one I'm happy to take you up on. So Phil, does that answer your question? I'll take silence as a yes in that case. Hajinda, back to you, please.
Yeah, just a quick one from me, Chair. I see a couple of other hands up. It was just to note that in previous arrangements, so when we were operating under the Cardiff Capital Region City deal, where Cardiff Council were providing the internal audit service, we did have an agreement where we were working to a 5-year rolling internal audit plan. So that kind of may address your kind of point about not only having an audit plan that's active in year with a predetermined range of areas to review and examine, but it also gives you foresight really then on the rolling plan going forward, and that hopefully will give a bit more assurance in terms of the balance of areas that we look. So perhaps I can pick that up with Mark and Lisa going forward, where we can look to maybe develop some kind of rolling programme of an audit plan going forward.
I think that would be very helpful. It also links back to the point about future generations, and we need to be looking forward as much as we ever look backwards here. So having a 3 or 5 year view on that really would be helpful. Thank you. If you take that as an action, that'd be grand. Sue, I think you're next, please. Sue? Sue? Paging Sue? No? Okay, we'll move on then to Sherry. You're on mute again, Sherry.
Okay, thank you. Quick question to Kelly with regards to the paper that you're going to bring for the next meeting around how all the bodies and committees connect and what the responsibility is. I'm just wondering if that can come in quite a digestible diagram format.
It'll be a diagram.
Yeah, because looking at all 200 odd pages of writing, it's quite a lot to digest. So just thinking of like the format of how we receive information. Just
of course, Sherry. I think we can do a very easy diagram that sets out the whole of our decision making and committee structure, and then perhaps just maybe one side of A4 that just explains in brief the terms of, without giving you pages of terms of reference. If we can just summarize those, and then perhaps if I can talk to some of the interfaces and some of the connections, that might be helpful.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things really. One, I noticed that in the plan that there's a review of investments, and I'm just feel it's when this review is undertaken, it'd be really useful to look at lessons learned for future investments going forward. So I just wanted to sort of indicate that I think that would be a really important part of the review, and just ask the question whether that is part, planned to be included in that. And my second question, if I could, is I noticed in the plan that there's 5 areas which are shown as, is it high priority or high risk? I'm not really sure in the plan. But given the time scales we've got left and the time that's left in the year, will those 5 high priority or high risk areas of review be brought forward in your audit plan for the year to be undertaken earlier rather than the others, or how are you going to prioritise the order in which these audits or reviews are undertaken?
Yeah, I'm happy to take those questions. So in respect of the review of investments, we've got an outline scope in the plan of the objective of the audit and the areas that we are going to look at. But we can, I've made a note of lessons learned for future, projects, so we can definitely, incorporate that into our work. In respect of the high and medium priorities, we've given a provisional within the planning process, because we've, in addition to the CJC plan, we work on RCT, an audit plan for RCT. So at the moment, there are provisional quarterly allocations for work. But I know Hajinda and I spoke a few weeks ago, and in view of the appointment of Liam Hall joining the CJC, that we have a meeting set up, I think it's within the next week or two, just to have those discussions with Liam around areas of assurance, timings, and when audits will be best undertaken, availability of audit staff. So those discussions have been arranged, and as Mark referred to earlier, this is much later in the year because we're in year one. Normally this plan would be coming much earlier to the subcommittee for approval, so we would be further along in that process normally, but there is a meeting scheduled, and from that meeting we'll have a priority order of areas of assurance, and we can allocate those out to the team then.
Thank you, Lisa. Phil.
Apologies, Chair. It was in relation to my last question. My hand not going up was a technical problem. I was trying to get some technical help from our support people, but that didn't work terribly well. Yeah, I think Sue has articulated what I was trying to get at. You know, when we've got high-risk projects, how quickly can we get involved? Because I know it's not our duty to challenge the executive if they make perhaps an ill-thought-out decision, but we have had some horrors in the past in Wales where perhaps they should have been scrutinised at a much earlier time rather than when they were seen to be going wrong.
If I can just make an observation there was a very good Audit Wales workshop a couple of weeks, if not months back now, where they looked at high-risk projects, high investment, high-risk projects, and cited the debacle of Edinburgh Trams as a case study. And one of the major lessons that came from it was the engagement of good governance and good audit within the whole process. So they encourage early engagement, but we must, I think, recognise that the executive and the bodies that exist within the CJC have got their roles to play, and we need to ensure that we plug in in the right place at the right time. So I think Kelly's paper hopefully will be able to address that for us.
Okay, thank you.
Agenda.
Yeah, Chair, just one point, just to go back on the point that Sue raised around lessons learned, just to give some assurance to the committee that that's something that we already do undertake. We have a programme management office function that does undertake a role around lessons learned, and usually tends to be at the end of a project, but not necessarily so. There has been instances where we've carried out lessons learned during midway for a project. So there is some of that documentation reports that already exist, which we're happy to share with the committee and discuss with Lisa in terms of the scope of the internal audit that'll be done on the investment, and perhaps that could be weaved into it then as well.
Thank you very much. That's kind. Any other comments or questions? No, good. Thank you very much for that. That then we were asked to consider and approve the draft risk-based internal audit plan for this financial year. Are we happy so to do? Hands, please. I think we're unanimous on that. Thank you very much. We will then move on to item 8 on which is the 2023-24 final outturn and unaudited annual return, CJC statutory function. Which is on page 39 of the pack, and we're asked to note the report and the recommendations set out to the CJC in the report, Appendix A. Once again, Hajinda, pleased to lead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to include these two next reports as part of this initial agenda item to provide the subcommittee with a bit of insight really into some of the previous arrangements that were operating, and hopefully members will find that beneficial in terms of its work programme going forward. So item 8 deals with the final outturn and unaudited annual return for the CJC statutory functions element as it were, and as outlined in the report, prior to the left and shift being enacted on the 1st of April, we actually had two parallel streams that were running alongside one another. And it was the view of the members, so it was the 10 council leaders who were actually responsible for governance for both arrangements to actually bring these two parallel streams together. And that's basically what the lift and shift done. And I think members felt that would be much more efficient use of their time and resources where we have the one governance arrangements overseeing both of the arrangements. So this report deals with the previous statutory arrangements. So it wasn't Chair, planning on going through the report. That's attached as the appendix, and it's fairly self-explanatory. But paragraph 6 sets out some of the key points for members, just to pick those out. So Chair, happy to take any questions really on the report.
Thank you, Jinder. Any questions or comments, observations? Did I detect that there's a target date of June for signing?
Yeah, so
signing.
That's the target date for the unaudited annual return to be signed. So we took this report to the CJC at this meeting on the 3rd of June, where they considered and approved the report, and both the Chief Financial Officer's certification and the Chair's signature was sent at that time. We're now in the period of the audit, so we've handed the internal audit and the working papers. Sorry, we've handed the annual return and the working papers to Audit Wales to commence their external audit, and there's a statutory deadline of the 30th of November for that audit to be completed and reported back. And what we generally tend to do, Chair, if there's any material changes, we would bring that back to the CJC, and at that point we can also bring it back to this committee. But if there's no changes, or if the changes are immaterial, then we don't tend to bring that back.
Great, thank you. Anything from anybody? Okay, well, we're asked to note the report and the recommendations set out to the CJC in the report set out in Appendix A. So can we please confirm that we're happy with that? Thank you, we're all there. We'll move on then to item 9, which is on page 68 of the pack, which is the final outturn of 23-24 Cardiff Capital Region 23-24 Joint Committee Revenue Budget final outturn report on page 68 of the pack, if you're following it there. So once again, agenda.
Okay, so final one for me then, Chair. So this report considers the operational budget for the other component, which is the Cardiff Capital Region City deal element, and it's a much larger part of the CJC's activities going forward. So on this occasion, this report will be going to the Corporate Joint Committee at the meeting of the 26th of July. So this report attached to the Appendix A is actually the draft report that we prepared that we go into that meeting. So committee have an opportunity here to obviously review and provide any comments that we'd be happy to take on board and factor into the report. And going forward, the aim of the subcommittee's work plan would be that we would bring draft reports to the committee so they have the opportunity to comment and review. So similar to the last report, I wasn't aiming to actually go through the report. Again, that's attached there for members. Paragraph 6 of the committee report, again, summarising and pulls out some of the key points that's included in the draft report. And again, Chair, happy to take any questions on the appendix.
Thank you. Any questions? Sherry.
Yeah, so I got a question on the first line, which is the staffing costs. I see we're under budget quite substantially. Is that going to cause any problems with delivering the objectives of the CJC?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as set out in the report, there is substantial underspend on the employee budget during the year. That was a matter that we brought to the attention of the CJC through the various monitoring reports that we set out, and paragraph 10 and the sub-point bullet points kind of set out the reasons for that. And there was a number of operational reasons and some other budgeting reasons as to why that underspend crystallised, and they're set out in paragraph 10. So I think the main part of it was we were in transition during 23-24, and the work was focusing on there around the kind of structure and the governance of the city deal going forward. So we deliberately did hold back a number of posts for that reason. Then there was a couple of other areas that we see there. There was a number of posts where the staff's costs were then recharged into external funding schemes. So from a budgeting position, they kind of generated an underspend because those costs were recharged to other budgets. And then the final point that we pick up there is something that we do tend to do is look at the capitalisation directive. So again, you know, the staff costs were there. It's just the way we accounted for them. About £214,000 worth of cash were capitalised. So yes, it was an underspend, a significant against the budget, but in terms of the level of resources, it was probably the vacancy provision part of it where we didn't fill posts. The other part of it is probably more technical adjustments around how we married costs against budgets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jinder. On that note, any other questions? No? Well, we are asked to consider and approve the draft 23-24 Joint Committee Revenue Budget Final Outturn Report as attached. All in favour? Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to item 10, which is at page 77 in the report pack, and I'll turn to Kelly to present the performance overview of the midterm report, and which we're asked to note.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I thought we would try and do with this report was just to provide some orientation, really, in relation to some of the performance and the evaluation frameworks we have in place, largely for our biggest programme, which remains the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal. It's still our largest programme. The Gateway Review activity in particular pertains to the City Deal. So I thought if I could just take the opportunity to get some background information to you on this, and also to share the Q3 performance report, which is the most recent report that we've reported into CJC, Welsh and UK governments, that might give you some good background information, which might be useful for onward reports and assessments that you may wish to undertake. So that's what you have in the paper in front of you. It's a bit of an overview, really, of the entire Gateway Review process, but also more to the point where we are in the Gateway Review process. We've had one UK government Gateway Review already. We're on to the second Gateway Review at the moment, and we're midway through that process, as this report indicates. Important to point out, Chair, that the Gateway Review really relates to the £500 million that we have in the City Deal Wider Investment Fund. You'll be aware that often we describe we've got a £1.2 billion City Deal, but 734 million of that goes direct to Transport for Wales for delivery of the South East Wales Metro. And it's the 495, 500 million that sits with us as part of the wider investment fund. So that's the only bit of the City Deal which UK government look at and evaluate progress against. So what I've tried to do really is to set out some of that background, which hopefully is self-evident, which tells you all about the Gateway Review process. The UK government departments which commission the Gateway Review process is the new Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government, but they work very closely with Treasury and, of course, the Secretary of State for Wales's office. And what they do every 5 years, but they do it by way of ongoing assessment, is make sure that they really commission deep dives, lots of research. They come in, they interview stakeholders, they look in depth at some of the projects, they do desktop analysis. But they really come in and look and make sure that there is scrutiny, external scrutiny, on the level of our progress. So as I say, we've been through one of those already back in 2019. We're now into the second Gateway Review process. So there's a lot of work that's ongoing all of the time. But you can see really that I think I've set out in paragraph 10 onwards where we are in terms of the midpoint, which I think is the really critical bit of this report. So in line with something we took back to the old regional cabinet in March of this year, you've got really in front of you today the local evaluation framework, which is the process by which we are assessed. And you have the midterm report findings, and of course, a very significant assessment of our work that was undertaken by the academic panel, which is part of this Gateway Review process. UK government commissions the Gateway Review, but independent consultants called SQW are actually commissioned to do the detailed work, which they then report back. So in paragraph 14, you've got a breakdown of the elements that the second Gateway Review is applying to. There's a deep dive of the first project the CCR undertook, which was the Compound Semiconductor Foundry project. There's an overview of our impact in relation to skills and capability, particularly around the venture programme. There's an overall evidence paper that looks across our interventions and gives some kind of indicator of performance. And you'll see as well that as part of wider assessments of our partnership infrastructure, different stakeholder sentiments, our reach, national, international partnerships, there's a very detailed assessment of that as well contained within your pack. I think the key messages for me, Chair, are probably contained from paragraph 15 onwards. You see some of the findings of this work to date. I think there's some really good news there around how we're trying to increase local economic development capacity. It's not just about the region working and having impact, it's about how that impact is filtering through to local authority partners and also to Welsh and UK government. I think there's evidence there. Hopefully you will see that good decisions are made. There's a good process for that. there's transparency around some of those key areas of impact as well. Of course, it's evolving all of the time. And I think the evolution that this report notes most of all is that to the CJC, going from a programme, as Ajinder's described, to being a corporate legal entity in our own right. Some interesting comments about risk appetite. Chair, you mentioned at the beginning, the CJC perhaps is looking at projects that carry higher risk, maybe higher reward. But the view of the independent commissioners was that at times we could look again at that risk appetite just to make sure it's proportionate to the projects. And sometimes we may have to take a higher risk depending on the area that we're looking at and the prospect of some of the yield that we are looking to really deliver upon. Partnerships, I think, again, always room for improvement here. We have many partnerships. We have lots of boards, subcommittees, as you will soon see. But again, it's about the high levels, I think, of focus, of discipline, the interface between those different partnerships, which is important. And again, some signs of real positive engagement there, which we will continue to build upon. In terms of the bit on stakeholders, I was very pleased to see some of the sentiments conveyed there. It's quite clear that CCR is starting to make a difference and held in relatively high regard by some of our stakeholders. And I think overall then, as you go through the list and you look at some of the academic panel feedback, some really interesting points they make there, particularly in relation to our approach to clusters, which they do believe is the right thing to do. Rather than spreading your bets and being all things to all people and supporting many different things, they really support the idea of smart specialism, having focus, having discipline. I think that comes across quite strongly. I was really pleased to see the comment about evidence of good management, which they believe is taking place. That was very pleasing to see. But again, strong evidence that we're in the right space in terms of backing innovation intensity, crowding in private finance, which is a really important part of this picture because it can't be about public subsidy. And overall, I think, given us some real confidence that, yes, there's always further to go. There's more that we can do with partnerships. There's much more that I think we have to do in relation to how we engage with civic society, citizen impact, community level impact, which is all noted. And hopefully we've got better pedigree now. We can do more of that now that we're a CJC. But yes, I think it was a pleasing report overall, but we can't be complacent. There's always going to be more to do. There's always going to be risks to manage as we develop new projects, as we look at new areas, new themes, new subjects. That risk is going to increase. So I think it really does require us to always sort of, look in the mirror, have that strong sense of self-assessment and self-evaluation, which I think is so important in this context. So I've also included for information, as I said at the outset, the most recent quarterly performance report, which was reported to UK Government, Welsh Government and our CJC board. That's Q3. Q4 is incoming, which we will share again with you very soon. But hopefully that gives you an overview of our most recent performance. I'll close on that point, Chair, because I think I've said enough. All of the papers there, you'll be aware that a couple are exempted because they do contain some commercially sensitive information. And I'm very happy to take questions and join in the discussion.
Thank you, Kelly. That's really helpful and really positive. I think there's some fabulously good news within that report. And I think the fact that it's commissioned at such an arm's length from us, it just adds to the value of the report itself. So well done indeed. You mentioned risk. Where and how is the organisational risk appetite discussed and recorded? Is it formally done?
So, Chair, there's probably a number of different mechanisms, really. I think in terms of your point around formulation, where do we set our risk appetite? I think in the days of City Deal, that was probably principally done around the investment and intervention framework, which really is our investment strategy for the City Deal. It talks about the kind of parameters, the kind of options and choices. It frames the level of interventions. It categorises them in relation to place, impact, the kinds of themes, clusters I've mentioned already. Then that really progresses, I think, to our annual business plan, where you see specific objectives set out around that. You've got our regional economic and industrial plan, which again sets out the kinds of things that will be important, not just in terms of nudging along, but the kinds of things that we have to do to really turn the dial on the South East Wales economy. All of that then gets categorised into our risk register, and I think you'll be pleased to know that we have two types of risk register. What we try and do is capture the macro level risks. This isn't just about the risks of managing individual projects and some of the operational and technical issues that we'll encounter. It's about the outside world. One of the biggest risks we face at this time, and in relation to projects around things like semiconductors, fintech, medical devices, is geopolitical risks. You know, risks that happen in other parts of the world really do impact our work, our supply chains, some of the companies that we're working with. We work with a lot of listed companies, for example. So we try and categorize all of that there. Then we very much have our operational approach to risk, which is about the program, the projects that we operate. I guess, you know, some of the interventions that we have to make, some of the partnerships involved. So it's at those three main levels, really, strategically in terms of the kinds of things that we do and the agenda that we set, the macro level risks then that form the backdrop to everything we do, and then the more operational risks that I guess are on a project by project basis. But Harjinder, risk really sort of sits with you, doesn't it, in terms of your role as finance, risk and assurance. But as you said already, our programme management office, they manage and bring together a lot of this information ongoing. And we do report something to our CJC board every quarter, don't we, just in terms of those localised operational risks. So they're just appraised about projects.
Yeah, and just to add to that then, Kelly, yeah, so to Alan, we have got a risk, you know, the CED has got a risk management strategy and policy document, which the Corporate Joint Committee, or as the CCR Cabinet as it was then, approved back in 2021, November 2021. So that sets up the framework in terms of how risk is assessed and managed, reported and also escalated within the organisation. And as Kelly said, we've got our programme management office that are responsible then for the day-to-day operational. They work very closely with the individual projects in terms of project risk registers, programme risk registers, and how that then aggregates up to the overall operational position, which we then seek to update Cabinet on a quarterly basis as part of the performance report. We also do include it as slides within the packs to our key stakeholders, Welsh Government and UK Government as well. I'm happy to set up maybe some kind of briefing session outside of the formal arrangements to maybe bring an update along those arrangements.
Thank you, Brenda. That would be helpful. I would be really interested to know how that works, and not because I'm questioning it. I just want to know that it's all in place, and I think that would be very, very valuable. So any time that suits would be really good. Thank you both for that. Any questions or comments from anybody else on this item? No. In that case, we're asked to note the progress report against the Gateway Review.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you, Chair.
I didn't see you. Sherry. You're back on mute 3 times in a row. The 3 strikes and you're out, Sherry. Come on.
I'm not normally accused of being too quiet. This is new territory for me. What I was going to say is actually my question can wait until after we agree this, because it's more of a general question in relation to things that we've discussed throughout the meeting. So I will lower my hand temporarily.
We're asked to note the progress against the Cardiff Capital Region Gateway Review process, the midterm report and the subsequent academic panel feedback. Are we happy so to do?
Definitely.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that. That takes us on to item 11, which is the date of the next meeting. Please note Friday the 27th of September with, I think, a 10 o'clock kickoff, again on Teams. Good. So is there any other business? I have one small point, and that is that I find it good practice when a meeting ends, the formal meeting ends, for us to have 5 minutes in more relaxed session privately with recordings off, just to review how the meeting went. So I'd like people to stay after the meeting, when I formally close the meeting, to stay for a few minutes longer. Sherry, you had a point, please.
Yeah, sure. So not coming from a governance and audit background, I'm more private sector. I would find it really valuable to have more in-depth discussions, I guess, around these frameworks and these policies to make sure I've got a really good understanding of what these policies are saying. Obviously, I've read them, but I think it would still be nice to have some sessions set up before the next meeting with the owners of these policies, and have sessions set up that we can join in to go through them and make sure we understand point by point. Because if we're going to scrutinise and review performance against them, I'm just keen to make sure that we understand, you know, what we're benchmarking against.
I think that's helpful. I think certainly conversations to date with the executive team here indicate that you are willing to get engaged with us and for that work to happen, which is really, really positive. But the more understanding that we have and the more briefing we have, the more value that certainly the lay members can bring and other members can bring to any discussion. So plan it out for us and lay it on, I think, would be my call back to the executive team on that one, please.
Thank you.
Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Kelly for explaining the South East Wales metro system and how most of the original funding money has gone in that direction. Could I ask that perhaps you distance yourself in future reports from that system, because it seems to be working quite well to the north of the region, but it's not working quite as well to the southeast, and there have been some hiccups, probably nothing to do with Wales and more to do with national rail. So I think a little bit of caution there to make it quite clear that we are dealing with about £500 million of investment, and the rest of it is going to somebody that we have little or no control over.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a good point. I think the frustrating thing for us is the targets for the city deal. So, Councillor, you'll be aware that we've got a target to create 25,000 high-skilled jobs, to increase GVA by 5%, and to bring in about £4 billion of private leverage. They stand for the city deal as a whole. So it's sometimes hard for us to get a grasp on what proportion of those targets should apply to the 500 million. So we're in an ongoing debate with government about that, but it's a good point. The gateway review process, though, as this report sets out, only applies to the 500 million that we have in the wider investment fund. But you're right, it does raise some good questions, doesn't it, about scrutiny, impact assessment of the other 734 million and how that applies to delivery of the South East Wales Metro.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Nathan.
That first name's always easier. It's much more mundane point, if I can. One is, I only said this is going to always be a Friday morning meeting. I'm forever taking up this cudgel at Torvine because Torvine doesn't believe in meetings in the evening. Is that going to be set in stone? Because I've got a full-time job. So actually trying to juggle all of this with meetings always in the daytime gets a bit tiresome, quite frankly. And secondly, and it's a small little bleat, I know everyone's very busy, but can we have the papers with at least a week in advance next time, please? Thank you.
Two reasonable points, which I'll push to the executive to consider for us, please. Kerry.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Nathan's already finished the one I would like to read in terms of a bit of notice in terms of the packs going out. 2 days to read 212 pages was, yeah, when you've got a full-time job and all the other responsibilities, yeah, not acceptable, at least 5 working days. So if we're sticking with Fridays, can you send them out the Friday before? You know, I'm probably not alone in that I do my homework for a lot of these committees on the weekends, you know, the sort of the classic Sunday afternoon when you used to do your homework from school, you now do your homework for your councillor meetings because it's the only free time effectively we've got. So if that could be handy. And another thing, thank you very much indeed, Chair, for naming the page numbers and for whoever put the pack together for those page numbers to be accurate, to use the search function on the PDF. But could we perhaps have indexing? It looks like an attempt was made on this report pack, but they didn't work. So if we could have the links there perhaps at the side so that we can jump to the various reports just in case we miss the page number being read out by the chair if we're formulating our own questions, etc. That would be much appreciated, so that much more user friendly, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can probably help with some of the sort of general admin. In relation to papers, apologies, we know that you need to have them in advance, and we know that if you have to consider hundreds of pages, then you need time to do that. We have not an excuse, but a reason that sometimes our papers don't come as quickly as we would like them to. We're of course indirectly elected, so we're often having to wait for information to come from our partners. So that feeds into some of the reasons that occasionally our papers come a little bit later than we would like them to. On this particular occasion, we're standing up an awful lot of committees all at once that haven't existed before. So that's an apology, and we will do our very best to do better for the next meeting. The same applies with indexing. We're just up against it, but noted, and I'm sure that everybody echoes the same point. Timing of meetings, that is up for grabs and discussion. So at the moment, the Corporate Joint Committee has agreed your provisional timetable of ordinary meetings, and that's what you've seen in the papers. You should have had diary invites for them. There are certain dates that have to be pretty fixed because they're tying into other things like budget. But in terms of timing of meetings and day of the week, we are absolutely open to alternative suggestions. We put this first meeting in at 10 o'clock in the morning because that's our kind of usual time when the Corporate Joint Committee sits. But we completely respect that people have jobs, and they also have caring arrangements, perhaps children, people that need to be picked up. We can perhaps take that discussion into our short briefing session post meeting when we finish the formal meeting. But yes, timing, dates of weeks, time of day, and that's something we can very, very much discuss.
Thank you, Jane. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. When you're talking about papers, are you talking about the electronic ones or hard copies? Just the electronic ones? Okay, thanks.
Any more points from anybody? Good. In that case, I think, where are we? 11:22 on Friday morning. We'll declare this meeting closed. If we can cease the recording, please, then we'll just have a few minutes to think about how we did. Jonathan, can you tell us when the recording's off, please?